Today we are going to look at dividing decimals, and we're going to start with dividing decimals by whole numbers. So the first thing you want to do is place the decimal point in the quotient or in your answer, and you want to put that above the decimal point in the dividend. So for example, when I have 7 32/100ths and I'm dividing by 4, here's my decimal point. I'm just going to put it in the same spot up here in the quotient. And then you just divide as you would with whole numbers. Let's try a couple of examples together. 7 6/10 divided by 4. So I'm going to set this up. 7 6/10 dividing by 4. So first I'm going to place my decimal point up here in the same spot in my quotient. And then we just divide using our long division algorithm. So 4 goes into 7 one time. And then I do 4 times 1 is 4. You can put a 0 here as a placeholder if you'd like to help you keep everything in line when you subtract. And then I have 6 minus 0 and 7 minus 4. Then I'm looking at how many times 4 goes into 36, and that's 9 times. So 4 times 9 gives us 36. Once we have 0 left over, we know we are finished. So our quotient is 1 9/10. Let's try another one. 4 38/100ths divided by 12. So I'm going to set this up. 4 38/100ths divided by 12. Place your decimal point in here first, and then start dividing. 12 does not go into 4, so I placed a 0 up here. 12 goes into 43 3 times, and 12 times 3 is 36. Then I'm going to subtract. Okay, so now I have 78. 12 is going to go into 78 6 times. So then 12 times 6 is 72. That leaves me with 6 left over. So instead of leaving that remainder there, what I'm going to do is place a 0 here. This is after the decimal point, so it doesn't change the value. Then I can bring that 0 down and keep dividing. 12 goes into 60 5 times. 12 times 5 is 60. Now I'm left with 0 remainder. So my quotient is 365 thousandths. Go ahead and try these 3 down here on your own. You're going to divide just like we did up here at the top. It says use estimation to check your answer. What that means, for example, 7 6/10 is really close to 8, and I know 8 divided by 4 is 2, so I can just check to make sure my quotient is very close to 2, and 1 9/10 is. Go ahead and work those 3 examples, and then unpause your video to check your work. All right, go ahead and take a moment to check your answers on those 3 at the bottom. All right, so we're going to turn the page and keep going here. So that's dividing decimals by whole numbers. Now we're going to look at what happens when we have 2 decimal numbers. So we're dividing a decimal by a decimal. For example, in this one, I have 4 56/100ths divided by 1 2/10. Essentially, what we want to do is make that divisor a whole number. But when we change the divisor, we have to change the dividend. It's much like fractions. What we did to the top, we did to the bottom. Remember, fractions are division problems, so if you change one number, you must change the other. So let's look at 2 examples together down here. We have 18 2/10 divided by 1 4/10. So if I set that up, it looks like this. 18 2/10 divided by 1 4/10. So what I'm going to do is multiply by a power of 10. And we talked yesterday about multiplying by a power of 10. And with decimal numbers, that means you're moving the decimal point. So if I want to move the decimal point in this number to make it a whole number, I'm just going to move it 1 time. Then it becomes 14. So if I moved that decimal point 1 time, I'm going to go over to this number and move that decimal point 1 time. So my new problem is 182 divided by 14. And now we just have 2 whole numbers to divide. So we would just go through our long division process. 14 goes into 1 0 times. It goes into 18 one time, and do 14 times 1 here. And then subtract. Oops, that's a 4. Sorry, guys. So then 14 is going to go into 42 3 times, and 14 times 3 is 42. So we got to 0. That means our quotient is 13. Let's try another one. 273 thousandths divided by 39 hundredths. So that looks like this. 273 thousandths. And we're dividing by 39 hundredths. So remember, what I'm dividing by, my divisor, this number cannot be a decimal. So I need to change it to a whole number. So I'm going to move that decimal point. In this case, I moved it twice to make that a whole number. So now I have to go over here and move this decimal point 2 times. So my new division problem is 27 3/10 divided by 39. So your divisor cannot be a decimal, but your dividend can. So I can leave 27 3/10 as a decimal, just like we did on the first page. I'm just going to put the decimal point up here in my quotient, and then I can divide. 39 doesn't go into 2. It doesn't go into 27, but it is going to go into 273 7 times. And 39 times 7 is 273. So my quotient is 7/10. Go ahead and try these two on the bottom on your own. Change those first numbers to whole numbers, and then remember to change your numbers in the middle by moving your decimal point the same number of times. Once you've tried them on your own, unpause the video to check your work. My quotients were 8 and 17. All right, let's go ahead and flip to the last page here, and we're going to go through an example in which we might need to insert zeros in the dividend or in the quotient. So just where there might be some special cases where we're going to have to follow some additional steps. So this example up here, I have 202 and 45 hundredths, and I'm dividing by 7 thousandths. So let's set that up so we can see what that looks like. So here's my problem. I can't have 7 thousandths as my divisor, so we need to move that decimal point to make that a whole number. So I'm going to move it 1, 2, 3 times to make that a whole number. If I move this decimal point 3 times, I need to go to my dividend and move that 3 times as well. So there's 1, 2, but I need to go 1 more time to get to 3. So I go again, and then I just put a 0 in here. So again, I moved it 3 times over here. So then I had to come over here and move that decimal point 3 times. There's 1, 2, but then I had to go 1 more time, which means I just place a 0 in that extra place value. So my new problem is 2,450 divided by 7. So then I'm just going to divide like I do with whole numbers. 7 goes into 2 0 times. It goes into 24 3 times. 7 times 3 is 21. Then we subtract here. So now I'm looking at my next place value, 35. 7 goes into 35 5 times. And 7 times 5 is 35. So now at this point, I get to 0. I don't have a remainder. But remember, if I still have a place value up here, you need to fill that in with a 0. So my quotient is 350. Go ahead and pause the video and try numbers 11 and 12 on your own. Then unpause to check your work. Okay, I do want to point a couple things out down here on these bottom two. So once I changed my divisor to a whole number, I had 380 divided by 16. So I can start dividing here. 16 goes into 3 0 times, and then it goes into 38 twice. So 16 times 2 is 32. Okay, we subtract. So now we have 60. And 16 goes into 63 times. But that is only 48. So we're left with 12. But we cannot have a remainder and we're out of place values. So what you can do now is place a decimal point here and then a 0. Because 380.0 is the same as 380. So then I can place my decimal point up in my quotient and just bring down that 0 and keep dividing. So 16 now goes into 120 7 times. And 16 times 7 is 112. That leaves me with 8. So I'm still not done. I'm going to add another 0 and bring that down. And 16 goes into 80 5 times. Now I'm left with 0, so I'm finished. And my quotient is 23 75/100. I do want to point out over here on number 12 that since I was dividing by 78, before I started, I made a list of the first few multiples of 78 out to the side, just because since that's a bigger number, I wanted to go ahead and have those multiples there. Okay, let's work a word problem together. So the question is, how many times more cellular phone subscribers were there in 2011 than in 1991? We are going to round to the nearest whole number. So you're always going to give me an exact number, an exact answer, unless it tells you otherwise. So we are looking at 2011, so that's this number here, and then 1991, so that's this number here according to our chart. So what we're doing is 331 59/100, and we're dividing that by 7 6/10. So we do need that divisor to be a whole number, so I'm going to move this over one time and move this over one time. So now my new problem is 3,115 9/10 divided by 76. So remember, we can always make a list of multiples first. So I could take 76, then add another 76, and keep going. Just the first 3 to 5 to get you started. So I know this is 76 times 1, 76 times 2, 76 times 3, and so on. So now let's go ahead and start dividing. I'm going to put my decimal point up here. 76 goes into 3 0 times, goes into 33 0 times. Now I'm looking at 331. Well, I can see that's between these two numbers, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to say 76 times 4, and I can see that that's 304. I'm going to subtract here. Okay, so looking at my next place value, it's 275. So if I look here, that's going to be between these two numbers. So that's 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to do 76 times 3, and we can see that that's 228. And then subtract. So now we get 479. Well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I know if we go 76 more, okay, we can still get so that we're not beyond 479. So I'm just going to go up one more and use 6. And 76 times 6, if I just add 76 here, I'm going to get 456. And I'm left with 23. So we could keep going, but in our question, it's telling us to round to the nearest whole number. So I can see that this would round to 44. So I would say that there were about 44 times more subscribers.